it's something ineffable that we can't really put words to it when we say, oh, it's sublime. It's beyond our ability to describe it. Perhaps it's an experience of vastness or of extraordinary beauty or of mystery even. And the Oxford Dictionary defines it as of such excellence, grandeur, or beauty as to inspire great admiration or awe. So it's something like to feel awe. It is a spiritual sentiment. To feel awe is a spiritual sentiment in whatever setting we are experiencing it, because it's an experience of the vastness of what is, and a concomitant shrinking of our sense of self. Say, imagine we're going out into the remote area outside the city where there are no lights, and it's a clear, moonless night, and we walk out and we see the stars and the glory of that canopy of stars and the Milky Way, and we feel like we are just a small speck in this infinitely vast universe. And we experience something, perhaps, if we are fortunate, we experience something that we might call awe. We are experiencing the sublime. We are having an experience of the sublime. So I feel that to experience the sublime, to get a taste of that experience, is actually to be in the presence of the divine. Or rather, since we are always in the presence of the divine, to get a taste, a little bit of understanding that we are in the presence of the divine, to feel that experience of being in the presence of the divine. So it's a way, cultivating this experience of sublimity is, I think, a way to deepen our spiritual life and to also to increase our general happiness as well. It is something that we can learn to experience. As it requires a certain readiness to experience it, an openness to this experience, an opening of our heart, an opening of our mind, perhaps, and so that we can go from the sublime to the sublime. Of course, the saying goes, from the sublime to the ridiculous. You've heard the saying, haven't you? No, many of you haven't heard it. There's a saying, from the sublime to the ridiculous. And I often felt, especially in the beginning of spiritual life, I felt that I was going always from the sublime to the ridiculous, because we get these tastes of peace and joy when we first start practicing meditation and prayer, and spiritual life is so new and so exciting, and we get maybe some little taste of a spiritual experience, and now we feel like, now I have really made great progress in spiritual life. And the next day, or maybe even the next hour, we're down in the old ego patterns, and we're getting angry, or we're behaving very immaturely, and then we realize, my God, where was I just an hour ago, and where am I now? I've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. I've fallen all the way down to the ridiculous. So rather, I feel like I would like to try to cultivate going not from the sublime to the ridiculous, but to go from the sublime to the sublime and leave the ridiculous far behind. So it's interesting to contemplate to consider the beginnings of the spiritual lives of the founders of our order. I'm going to read what Sri Ramakrishna said about his first spiritual ecstasy. Of course, it was in his boyhood in the remote village of Kamarpukur, which now is not so remote, but in those days it was extremely remote. Still, it takes some time to get there from the city, but it's turned into a large town because of Sri Ramakrishna's birth there, of course. So he's talking about his boyhood, and he says, in that part of the country, children are given muri to eat, the puffed rice. No, they sometimes call it parched rice, but we, at least in the English, in the Great Master, it says parched rice, but I'm calling it muri because that's what it is. Air capsules, we used to call it sometimes. So children are given muri to eat in small baskets. Those who have no such baskets in their houses eat it from the folds of their cloth. So they just hold it in the fold of the cloth. They hold the muri there and they eat it. Otherwise, they might get a little basket. So Sri Ramakrishna would get a little basket. While loitering in the fields, some boys eat it from baskets and others from the folds of their cloth. I was then 6 or 7 years old. One morning, I took muri in a small basket and was eating it while walking on the narrow bulks in the, this is the cornfields. It's almost certainly the rice fields. I don't know why the great master said cornfields. The rice fields. The bulk means of course the fields have to, those of you who have seen rice fields know, the rice has to grow underwater for some time. So there's walls around the section of the field, and that's called a bulk. And when the crop is growing, you can walk along that bulk. And then after the harvest, of course, it's all dry, but the bulks are still there for the next year. So while walking on the narrow bulks in the rice fields, it was the month of Jaishtha or Ashar. In one part of the sky, there appeared a beautiful black cloud charged with rain. I was looking at it while eating the muri. Very soon, the cloud covered almost the whole sky. And then a flock of milk-white cranes flew against that black cloud. It looked so beautiful that I became very soon absorbed in an extraordinary mood. He says it, apurva bhav tanmoy hoy. He got absorbed in this extraordinary mood, we can call it. Such a state came on me that my external consciousness was lost. I fell down, and the rice got scattered near the bulk. People saw this and carried me home. This was the first time that I lost external consciousness in ecstasy. So here is a case where Sri Ramakrishna's first step into the world of spiritual ecstasy occurred when he saw an event of extraordinary beauty in nature. It was a beautiful day what is the part of the year, Jaishtha? What is that? It's in May. So the rains would start coming maybe, or Ashar. May, June, or June, July. So it would be, so it was probably sometime around June, month of June, we can say. So it would have been a beautiful blue sky, and then this dark cloud coming, and then these cranes flying across the cloud. And he became lost in this mood which was inspired by that tremendous beauty. His mind. So let's consider Narendra, the future Vivekananda, Narendranath. When he was 15, he experienced his first spiritual ecstasy. And I'll read, this is from Swami Nikhilananda's biography. The family was journeying to Raipur in the central province, quite a distance from Calcutta, and they had a journey of several days' parts. So they're just sitting in the backs of bullock carts, slowly going across the roads like that. But it was extraordinarily beautiful in that remote area. And on that particular day, the air was crisp and clear. The trees and creepers were covered with green leaves and many-colored blossoms. Birds' plumage warbled in the woods. The cart was moving along a narrow pass where the lofty peaks rising on the two sides almost touched each other. So they're going through a pass where the peaks are rising far above, and all the beautiful birds and bees and everything. And then Narendra spied in a large cleft of a giant cliff high above, a giant beehive, which had been there perhaps for ages, a huge beehive. The bees had been hiving there, nesting there for a long time. And suddenly, his mind was filled with reverence for the divine providence. And he lost outer consciousness and lay thus in the cart for a long time. And even after returning to the deceived world, he did this joy. There's another description of this, which gives us a little more taste of how his mind went to this state. This is from the life of Vivekananda. It's written that Naren was charmed with the exquisite grace and beauty with which the Almighty Creator had adorned the rugged bosom of the earth. On that particular day, the party was passing over the Vindhya range, where the lofty hills on either side of the road almost met. The verdant trees and creepers laden with flowers and joyous with the warbling of birds of variegated colors filled Naren's heart with ineffable bliss. Suddenly, his eyes alighted on a very large hive in a cleft in one of the hills. It must have been there a very long time. His mind, in thinking of that colony of bees, was soon lost in wonder at the majesty and power of the divine providence. So, seeing this sublime sight, this extraordinary sight of this beehive which had been there perhaps for ages amidst this beauty, and he became absorbed in an ecstasy, he had a spiritual experience. So, two seminal figures of our movement first broke through the wall of the sense-bound life via sensual experience of the beauty of nature. We can call it nature mysticism. There is in Western mysticism, there's also a stream of nature mystics who would go into the natural world and feel that in that way they could best commune with the divine through the beauty in nature. So it seems to me that the divine is always, constantly showing itself to us, offering us chances to experience the divine in so many different ways, in beauty, in vastness, in immensity. It is easier to see. But actually in everything, in everyone, everywhere, we have the chance, the opportunity to see the divine. It turns out to be easier in certain places, in certain circumstances. And I believe we can cultivate this capacity to see the divine. And perhaps we start with something easy, like the view of the mountains and that kind of thing. And gradually we learn to extend that to our daily waking experience. Swami Akhandananda, Gangadhar Maharaj, was one of the youngest of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. And as a young sannyasin, he traveled all over the Himalayas and went as far as Tibet. Remarkable experiences he had, tremendous hardship he faced in those places, walking barefoot through the snows because the shoes that he got just gave him terrible blisters. So he took them off and he just went barefoot even through the snows. And he said it was safer that way because with barefoot you might at worst get frostbite, but with shoes you would slip off the ice and fall down a cliff thousands of feet below and lose your whole life. So this describes his experience when he was reaching Gangotri, the Himalayan village where the descent of Mother Ganga is immortalized and where she is worshipped. Of course, the actual source of Ganga is further up on Gomukh. As I proceeded along the road to Gangotri, the grandeur of the Himalayas began to unfold before my eyes. The huge mountain range, shaped like a tortoise, all white with snow, rose before me. It is from this mountain that the Bhagirathi was running down with sharp bends and with her gurgling waters, as if chanting, Hara, Hara. At Gangotri, the stream of the Ganga is rather narrow, but with enough force to carry away Indra's 100 white elephants. The white waters of the Ganga rush with such rapidity and force, perhaps to sanctify the innumerable jivas on this mundane plain. The river Bhagirathi runs between high mountains, whose upper slopes are white with snow. Below the snow-clad tops grow tall pines. On either side of the stream are white rocks, smooth as marble, piled one upon another like a Vedic altar. This panoramic view was so picturesque that I wholly abandoned myself to it and felt I was no more on this earth. I moved from rock to rock, sitting now here, now there, as I thought I would never see such a sight again. I took in as much of that divine Himalayan beauty and calmness as my eyes and senses could absorb, till my heart was full. I did not know that the day had almost passed. I could not think of leaving that place. A monk found me in this trance-like state and somehow managed to wake me up and take me with him to Gangotri. So this is Swami Akhandananda's experience of roaming in the Himalayas. And it often strikes me the Western versus the Eastern approach to this natural beauty. In America, you find a place of natural beauty, and they say Lookout Point, and they'll have a little cafe there, and you can go and drink coffee or soda pop and look at the view, and you put a few quarters in the binoculars, and you can look through the binoculars. And in India, what do? They build a temple. That's the difference. They build a temple. They recognize that here you can feel the divine. And so this is the place to build a temple. Let me share a quote from Albert Einstein. We think of Einstein as a great thinker, a great scientist, who maybe, was he spiritual? Most scientists are materialists. But see what Einstein says about the sense of mystery, the sense of awe. He says, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. It's remarkable. He's saying, if we can't experience this sense of awe in the face of the mysterious, we are as good as dead. He recognizes that this is a spiritual sensibility, actually. This insight into the mystery of life, he says, has also given rise to religion. To know that what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their most primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling, is at the center of true religiousness. In this sense, and in this sense only, I belong in the ranks of devoutly religious men. He goes on to say, it is enough for me to contemplate the mystery of conscious life, perpetuating itself through all eternity, to reflect upon the marvelous structure of the universe, which we can dimly perceive, and to try humbly to comprehend even an infinitesimal part of the intelligence manifested in nature. He's writing like a mystic, isn't it? He's writing like a mystic who is awed by the mystery of consciousness itself and awed by the patterns and systems that he can perceive in nature. So I'd like to turn now to Swami Vivekananda and his training of Sister Nivedita, his Western disciple, in whom he saw her tremendous potential and also saw how he had to almost beat out of her certain Western ideas that were holding her back. So he is training her to think like a Hindu. And so when they were in Kashmir together in 1898, of course, the beauty there is tremendous. It's perhaps, as Vivekananda himself would say, the most beautiful place on earth. So she's writing that Swamiji would take up the subject of the Hindu love of nature as shown in the choice of sites for temples and architectural monuments, as I just mentioned. As he had declared in London that the saints lived on the hilltops in order to enjoy the scenery, so now he pointed out, citing one example after another, that our Indian people always consecrated places of peculiar beauty and importance by making there their altars of worship. And this, we can see again and again some of the important places of worship, like the Himalayan temples of Gangotri and Kedarnath and Badrinath and Yamunotri, and there's so many other mountain temples, Amarnath, and then, or say in the south, the southernmost tip of India, Kanyakumari, is at the southernmost tip where the Bay of Bengal meets the Indian Ocean, and where you can see both the sunrise and the sunset in the same place. Tremendous places of natural beauty, and there the temples are built. But Swami Vivekananda also was trying to teach Nivedita and us to keep that appreciation within. That he found that the Western tendency is to express everything. Oh, look how beautiful, see how beautiful. And he said, see, that diminishes the experience. So now she's going to describe his teaching here, saying the constant expression of feeling, whether of pain, admiration, or surprise, was to him shocking. Shocking, even, this constant expression of feeling. It was not necessary to stigmatize it as irreligious, for it was ill-bred. The Oriental expects of a man that he should feel and keep his feeling to himself. Any constant pointing out of the curious or the beautiful appears to him an unwarrantable intrusion on the privacy and self-directedness of thought. It's very interesting how he didn't like that constant expression of feeling. Let it take it within, let it take you deeper within. And she goes on to say, this was a point on which the Swami was exacting. He would impose on the European disciple long periods of severe restraint. Struggle, on one occasion he told her, struggle to realize yourself without a trace of emotion. So, what does that mean? We like to think of emotion is tremendously important in spiritual life. We cultivate emotion and purify it into devotion. Here he's saying, without a trace of emotion. And there's a nice example here. Watching the fall of dead leaves once in the stillness of an autumn evening. So there's an autumn evening, and they're watching the dead leaves fall off a tree in the dusk. And the stillness, and naturally, it's an exquisitely beautiful sight. So, watching the fall of dead leaves once in the stillness of an autumn evening, he did not deny that there was poetry in the sight, but he declared that mental excitement, roused by what was merely an event of the external sense world, was childish and out of place. All Western people, he said, had to learn the great lesson of holding experience and emotion apart. And then she quotes him, watch the fall of the leaves, but gather the sentiment of the sight from within at some later time. Sometimes we go with every year, perhaps you know, I'm invited to Tennessee to take a retreat in the Smoky Mountains there just near the Carolina border in Tennessee. It's beautiful scenery, and we take a hike on the Appalachian Trail. And often it's a tremendously beautiful scenery. There are these bald, rolling hills, and sometimes, oftentimes, actually, the clouds are blowing over them, and you're walking through the clouds, and then the sun pokes through. And it takes one's breath away. But I also find that some people, they're going along and they're talking and chatting and yak, and oh, and yes, and my job, this and that, and they're missing the whole thing. They're missing it. Shut up. Close your mouth and open your eyes and open your heart and see the glory of the Lord manifesting before you. And then hold that in. And don't express it. Take it within. Let that take us deeper within. So that let that experience still our minds and let our mind awaken with wonder and awe and take us deeper. So there's a caution here because at the same time, we've been talking about tasting the sublime, tasting the experience of the divine in natural beauty. But the danger is that then we become slaves to sense experience, because we're always then seeking for some experience of tremendous beauty in order to inspire us. And it doesn't take us deeper. So she quotes him as saying that the Swami would speak with horror of that bondage which shows itself in the quest of subtle metaphysical pleasures. In all idealism, he would say, lies the danger of idealizing merely what we have reached. And then he says, mind, he said, as he talked of future methods, no loaves and fishes. He's referring, of course, to the miracles that Jesus had had just a few loaves and a few fishes, and he fed the multitude. He said, no loaves and fishes. No glamour of the world. All this must be cut short. It must be rooted out. It is sentimentality, the overflow of the senses. It comes to you in color, sight, sound, and associations. Cut it off. Learn to hate it. It is utter poison. So interesting, we see this pull of this almost like a paradox. We have these two ideas. On the one hand, experiencing a tremendous awe, experiencing the sublime, getting a taste of the vision of God in a beautiful experience in nature. And yet also a caution, go further. Don't stop there. Don't then thus therefore become a slave to sense experience. What is that experience of beauty actually? Nivedita gives another teaching of Vivekananda. This was later, they were on the ship going back to for the second Swami Vivekananda's second visit to the West in 1899. They were on board the ship. And of course, Nivedita Swamiji would expound at length on so many different topics, history and art and religion, and all intertwined. And she writes how some of the most beautiful scenes in the world have been made for me more beautiful by listening in their midst to these long soliloquies. Then she describes one experience. It was dark when we approached Sicily. It's, of course, part of Italy in the Mediterranean. It was dark when we approached Sicily, and against the sunset sky, Etna was in slight eruption. That means the volcano, Mount Etna, was not in a big eruption, but there was the sun is setting and there's smoke coming off of the peak of Mount Etna. As we entered the Straits of Messina, the moon rose, and I walked up and down the deck beside the Swami, while he dwelt on the fact that beauty is not external, but already in the mind. On one side frowned the dark crags of the Italian coast. On the other, the island was touched with silver light. And then he says, Messina must thank me, he said. It is I who give her all her beauty. Fascinating thought. Even her description of it inspires me to think that it's the sunset and the moon has risen and the volcano is in slight eruption and the dark crags and the silver light. And then Vivekananda says, Messina must thank me. It is I who give her all her beauty. So I'd like to turn now a little bit to the contemporary scientific research. There's some researchers researching the experience of awe. In particular, one, he's a psychologist, a professor in, oh, I should have written it down, I don't remember now, some university in Northern California. Of course, California. Named, and I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Dacher Keltner. It's Dacher. Dacher. It was German, but he's not German. He's American. He was a hippie. And he's written a book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. A fascinating book. It's not quite awesome. It doesn't read like a spiritual book. It's still, he's trying to be scientific, and they've done lots of studies. But they find that the experience of awe changes people. And they do studies like and that a lot of the psychological studies are done on college students. Why? Because the people doing the research are professors at universities. So they do tests like they'll bring some college students and ask them to look at a beautiful grove of trees. And then someone is walking by who's actually in cahoots with the researchers, and they accidentally drop the bundle of papers and pens and things that they're carrying, and they fall all over the ground, and they start picking them up. And they find that, and so there are two groups of testers. One, the students, they're asked to look at a beautiful grove of eucalyptus trees, an old giant grove. And the other group is asked to stand there and look at the building, an ordinary building. And then this thing happens where the person drops all the books and whatever. And the people who are looking at the trees are more likely to come over and help pick up the things. They're tasting at least some kind of experience of beauty, or perhaps they're getting a little taste of awe, maybe. And they're more likely to help the person who dropped the things. Yes. How amazing. Why is it? Because this experience of awe, it diminishes our self-importance as we sense something vaster than ourselves. And we start to feel connected with other things. We start to feel connected with the universe. We start to feel connected with others. So his definition of awe, being in the presence of something vast and mysterious that transcends your current understanding of the world. And he argues that we can cultivate this experience of awe and wonder, and that will benefit us physically, emotionally, psychologically, and he kind of hints at spirituality. I would add definitely spiritually. So they did a study across 26 cultures, I think interviewing something like 2,600 subjects, so 100 subjects from each of 26 different cultures, and found certain commonalities. So they found 8 main areas in which people experience awe. And actually nature, beauty of nature, was only number 3 on the list. Though interestingly, there are some differences among cultures. And in America, for Americans, beauty in nature was number 1. But the number 1 total, considering all the cultures, was called moral beauty. Seeing the tremendous courage, kindness, strength, or the ability to overcome obstacles in somebody else brings people to an experience of awe. And we can think of perhaps someone who overcomes tremendous physical handicaps to achieve something great, or tremendous handicaps of poverty, or someone who saves somebody's life, or is ready to sacrifice their own life for what is right. Those kind of things. Moral beauty. Moral beauty. And the second one, I'll go through. We're not going to discuss, I think, in depth each of these. But a second one is, he calls it collective effervescence. We feel merged into a collective self, a tribe, an oceanic we. And this often happens this will happen with other people and in certain rituals, moving in unison. Believe it or not, big sporting events can bring about this feeling. When 50,000 people are all watching a game and they're all supporting their team, and then they do the wave. Have you heard of the wave? Where they start, and so what happens is the arms of the people go up, and then they go down again, and the next people go up. And so you can see the wave going all around the stadium as the people raise their arms and lower it. And apparently that can bring about a sense of awe, that I'm just one of these 50,000 people, and we're all part of an organism, as it were, that's moving as this wave goes around the stadium. Apparently that can bring, I haven't ever attended an event like that, but a big rock concert perhaps, or a dancing in all-night dance parties, no? Or even being stirred up at some kind of political rally or protest rally where thousands of people come to protest something. And of course, religious rituals. And I was thinking that, well, let's go through the rest of them. Of course, number 3 is nature. Number 4 is music, either as a musician, as a participant in the music, or hearing music. The number 5th is visual design. Think enormous cathedrals, or enormous human-made structures like a dam, a giant dam, or an enormous bridge, the beauty of the Golden Gate Bridge, for instance. Then number 6 is spiritual and religious awe. Number 7 is life and death issues. The birth of a child, the death, being present for the birth of a child or the death of a person, entering this world and leaving it. And I think any mother who had a natural childbirth will say that, yes, it's a profound experience to give birth. And I was not quite present for the birth of a niece. My cousin was in Japan, and I was there because her husband had to go away, so I was there to take her to the hospital in the middle of the night. And taking her there, I saw her large with child, and then an hour later, I saw a tiny little infant. And I never realized when we first come out of the womb, we're really tiny. Usually we see babies when mothers don't bring them out for the first month or two, and then you see them when they're a few months old. And you think, small. They're really small. We're really small when we come out. It was very moving experience. And then finally, number 8, epiphanies. When we suddenly gain a deep understanding of some essential truth of life or some fact about ourselves, suddenly something opens, we gain some new understanding, it can be an experience of awe. So I was thinking how, I was just imagining, say, the experience of attending the Arati at Belur Mutt. And here you have a number of these points are covered, because one, it's a beautiful location on the bank of the Ganga. Second, you have this beautiful building, the visual design, the geometry of the temple. And then third, you have music. And fourth, you have 1,000 people crammed into the temple watching this ritual going on. And then, of course, you have the spiritual vibrations of the place. So all these combine to create a powerful experience of attending the arati at Belur Math. And it's so choreographed, and the pujari is perfectly waving those lights, and the chamara is like it's floating as it dances through the air as we watch it, and the singing is going on. It's tremendous. So many of these wonders are incorporated together in an experience like that. So oftentimes when we think of awe, we remember some particular experience, like, oh, the time my child was born, or the time I saw the Himalayas for the first time, and I had that experience of awe. But this author, Keltner, suggests actually that there is something we can call everyday awe. Now, it might not be overwhelming like some of these experiences, but that people typically do experience awe regularly. 2 or 3 times a week, they have some experience of awe. And of course, we can cultivate that, and we can have awe every day. We can have from the sublime to the sublime. We can cultivate that wonder, to live with wonder. And the essential component of the experience of awe is a reduction of what he calls the default self. That means our ordinary ego self. And there's even something in the brain that they've measured that when we experience awe, the activity of the default mode network, the DMN, that subsides. And the default mode network is parts of the brain that are active when we process information from an egocentric point of view. So even on a biological level, we find that the experience of awe has to do with diminished ego, self-thinking of self, operating from our limited ego. So he suggests, and I would agree with him, that we can live with wonder, cultivate a sense of wonder, a sense of curiosity, a sense of amazement. I remember at Mayavati, sometimes we would see these unusual insects, and the editor, Swami Satyaswarupananji, and I would come, and we would sometimes spend 5 minutes looking at a very unusual insect, which was maybe sunning itself on a rock in the ashram garden. Why not? So Keltner suggests that we tap into our childlike sense of wonder. All children are curious. All children have that sense of wonder. Many times in adulthood, we lose it, but it's still there. We can tap into it, tap into that childlike sense of, oh, what is this? Curiosity, wonder, amazement. If someone might think that, oh, if you're experiencing awe, you're not a clear thinker, you're a fuzzy thinker, then you're not thinking clearly. Actually, the opposite is true. The great scientists were impelled by their curiosity and by their wonder. Newton was amazed seeing a rainbow, and that stimulated his curiosity. What causes a rainbow? He and Kepler both. And they did all kinds of calculations, and they began to understand how light refracts through lenses, through water and lenses and all that. From that awe gave birth to the deep thinking, actually. So we can cultivate a reverence for all of life, for that infinite complexity and our own little place in the infinite cosmos. Here's a quote that from the author that I really liked. He says, "It is hard to imagine a single thing you can do that is better for your body and mind than finding awe outdoors." He's also American, of course. Doing so leads, and now he gives all kinds of benefits. Doing so leads to the reduced likelihood of cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, diabetes, depression, anxiety, and cancer. It reduces asthma in children. It leads to reductions in everyday aches and pains, allergies, vertigo, and eczema. These benefits of being in nature have been observed across the lifespan, ranging from newborns, who enjoy higher birth weight when born near green spaces, to the very elderly. Our bodies respond to healthy doses of awe-inspiring nature like we respond to a delicious and nutritious meal, a good sleep, a quenching drink of water, or an uplifting gathering with friends or family. We feel nourished, strengthened, empowered, and alive. Okay, so it's interesting and it's encouraging, but also a little disappointing that he talks only about the physical health benefits of it. I'm trying to suggest that actually going and finding awe in life, finding wonder in life, and in all those 8 areas of wonder, and perhaps it's wonderful to contemplate that moral beauty also, to see the moral beauty of others. That is a great opportunity for us to deepen our spiritual lives and to go not from the sublime to the ridiculous, but learn to go from the sublime to the sublime. Learn to see the sublime in so many different areas. We have so many different ways in which we can experience the divine. Keltner also notes certain physical signs that accompany awe, like, we might know them, the hairs on our skin, they stand up, the horripilation. Sri Ramakrishna called this also a sign of spiritual mood. When he would get a spiritual mood, his hairs would stand on end. So, tears and certain vocalizations like, oh, ah, whoa. These are common, apparently, across cultures, even with different languages. The expressions of awe are similar. Ralph Waldo Emerson, just a quick quote from Emerson. In the woods, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. So Emerson takes it to that step that we want to hear, this, that actually it becomes a spiritual experience. Ah, right. Yes. Right. And for a while, there was something that every evening at, 7 o'clock or something? People would come out of their houses and their apartments and they would bang on pots just to express a communal gratitude for their sacrifice. Okay, final quote, and then I'll let you go home. Swami Vivekananda, in his tremendous lecture called God in Everything, based on the Isha Upanishad, he says, I can only lay before you what the Vedanta seeks to teach, and that is the deification of the world. The Vedanta does not in reality denounce the world. The ideal of renunciation nowhere attains such a height as in the teachings of the Vedanta. But at the same time, dry, suicidal advice is not intended. It really means deification of the world. Giving up the world as we think of it, as we know it, as it appears to us, and to know what it really is. Deify it. It is God alone. We read at the commencement of one of the oldest of the Upanishads, whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with the Lord. We have to cover everything with the Lord himself, not by a false sort of optimism, not by blinding our eyes to the evil, but by really seeing God in everything. Well, my idea for tonight's talk is that we are called to do that. It's easiest to begin with these 8 wonders which are described, seeing God in instances of tremendous moral beauty, of tremendous courage, seeing beauty in nature, seeing the divine in nature, seeing the hand of the divine in a large gathering of people, hearing the divine reflected through transcendental music, all these different areas. And then, as we cultivate this sense, we can, perhaps with William Blake, even see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.